Conversation today is structured around two presentations and a roundtable discussion. The first presentation will focus on energy efficient appliances for cooling in Saudi Arabia. And the second presentation will delve into energy efficient appliances for heating in the European Union. The roundtable will focus on heating, cooling, and smart appliances, underscoring the importance of strengthening appliance policies that consider not just efficiency, but connectivity and flexible operations. So I'm really delighted to see such a great panel of speakers and panelists who are participating in the discussion today. And I also very much want to thank Brazil for hosting this event. And we're also honored to have Ms. Edith Bayer, Policy Analyst at the IEA, to moderate the session. So thanks so much, Edith, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mary. And I'd just directly like to invite Mr. Abdulaziz Al-Zubayhi to please podium. Thank you.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Thank you for the opening remarks and introduction. We'd also like to thank Brazil for hosting this event. It's a great opportunity to share Saudi Arabia's experience in formulating sustainable energy efficiency policy in the building sector, closely looking at the cooling in Saudi Arabia. So to put things into perspective, the kingdom's efforts in energy efficiency just started back in 2010 upon the establishment of the Saudi Energy Efficiency Center, in short SEAD, where we initially focused on three major sectors, buildings, industry, and transport, collectively accounting for more than 90% of the domestic energy demand. And when we take a closer look at buildings, we find that most of the electricity accounts for ACs or cooling by 65%, followed by 11% accounted for white goods and lighting as well. So we had to mitigate this increase in demand in the building sector, especially for ACs and cooling, required cooling. And we did this through multiple efforts in four pillars. First of all, the development of standards and regulations, and I'll talk about that in just a few. Second is the investment in the development of the human capacity building as well. It's a very important pillar for us in Saudi. Third is development of incentive schemes as well. And last but not least, the retrofit exercises or practices in the existing building stock to save energy and mitigate the increase in demand in the sector. So when it comes to the first pillar, the development of standards and regulations, we've developed 28 standards and regulations in Saudi, covering building envelope and indirectly related to the required cooling, mitigate the required amount of cooling in buildings. We've also covered all types of air conditioners developing standards with continuous improvements for the minimum energy performance standard requirements. Since 2012, the first published standard for ACs until 2018, we increased the minimum energy performance standard requirements for split air conditioners by 57%, just to mitigate this increase in consumption, and naturally phase out the inefficient products in the market. We've also recently, in 2021, introduced the seasonal energy efficiency ratio. So following international practices and taking into consideration the weather temperature bin in Saudi Arabia, where we issue labeling for these AC products. Now, most of the products, energy efficient products in buildings have issued standards and regulations, but 9 of them have mandatory labeling. So by this, we enable the end user to make better choices upon purchase of efficient technologies while comparing between products. Not only that, but we've developed the Saudi building code. So any type of building in Saudi, whether it's residential, governmental, or commercial, that's going to be newly built and constructed, have to abide by the enforcement and requirements of the Saudi building code. And this concerns the new buildings. And I'll get back to afterwards with the retrofits of the existing building stock. Not only that, when it comes to human capacity building, we've developed a mobile app for all end users. So they can simply scan the QR code on the label upon the product for two reasons. One, for inspection purposes, to ensure that the information displayed on the label actually matches the product information. And if not, they can actually just report that it's not matching, and then the government will take the required actions afterwards. We also enable them to make comparison. If they want to go purchase a product, let's say air conditioners, then we have a list of all ACs that are available in the market that are actually more efficient. So we would aid them in making better choices upon purchasement. And when it comes to testing and inspection, we have these standards and regulations in place. But if we're not going to ensure that these standards or minimum energy performance standard requirements are met, then we're not going to get the most out of these standards and regulations. So we have a solid inspection and testing program in Saudi Arabia, where we do inspection visits either in the market or draw samples from the borders and test them. We've tested more than 2,500 samples we have purchased. More than 6 million products have been re-exported from borders that do not meet the minimum energy performance standard requirements in Saudi. And we've conducted more than 100,000 inspection visits all over, just to ensure that the requirements are being met. And this is something that we find very unique in Saudi Arabia. Not a lot of countries have applied this type of inspection scheme. And going back to the human capacity building, we have a national awareness program. We've launched more than 25 mass media campaigns throughout the kingdom, where we aware people and promote energy efficiency activities that would save energy. When it comes to AC, we promote setting the temperature upon a certain thermostat degrees on 24 degrees Celsius, according to our thermal conditions in Saudi. We've also promote actually purchasing the exact and wanted capacity for the specific size, so not to go to overcapacity and then consume more energy, and so on. And just recently, we've also launched a national awareness campaign targeting kids from 4 to 12 years of age. And this is something that we don't see in other countries as well, because we think that this age group is very significant towards energy efficiency, promoting energy efficiency savings measures as well. Now, we also provide technical courses in universities. More than 22 universities in Saudi have incorporated energy efficiency curriculums, and more than 120,000 students have enrolled in these courses. We also provide certification programs, whether it's certified energy managers and auditors and other certification programs, where more than 600 individuals have been successfully certified. So we ensure that the required skill set in Saudi Arabia are being met for now and the future energy efficiency practices. Not only that, but we've taken a step further. We've developed an incentive scheme for high efficient air conditioners of the type split ACs of 13 and above energy efficiency ratio. So what happens is that we incentivize end users upon purchasing air conditioning products that they would go to a targeted and selected models, and then we provide incentive scheme upon purchase. And this incentive scheme lasted for a pilot phase for 6 months, and then a 2.5 rollout, a 2.5 year full rollout. More than 125,000 end users have benefited from this incentive scheme, where more than 295,000 high efficient ACs have been sold in the market compared to regular ACs that do not save energy. The last pillar is that we focused also on retrofitting of existing building as well. We've developed a licensing scheme to certify energy services company to conduct retrofit activities in the existing building stock, plus the development of the National Super ESCO Tershid, where all government buildings are required to go through Tershid as an intermediary to conduct building retrofits. Out of the existing buildings, governmental stock and public schools, 12,600 buildings have either conducted retrofit activities or have signed contracts to conduct retrofit activities in the future. Not only that, but we've also covered street lamps. We've retrofitted and changed more than 3.6 million street lamps out of the total 4 million across Saudi Arabia. Now, these efforts are conducted to mitigate the increasing consumption in the building sector. And of course, with the focus on AC products, we've also just recently have a pilot phase launched for not only split air conditioners, but for window type of ACs, where the end user can purchase and replace his old inefficient window AC with a new one, designed one right now. And we provide incentive scheme as well. We're currently in the pilot phase, targeting 50,000 units, but then we're going to expand, hopefully expand in the future. Now, these efforts are conducted in Saudi Arabia, but we did not stop there. Of course, we have more work to do within Saudi, but we're also collaborating with the region as well. Just 2 weeks ago, we've met under the Gulf Standardization Organization. We've met government members from all over the Gulf countries to establish one unified label and standard for the ACs. So we can accommodate all efforts, where Saudi Arabia shared its experience with the most recent update of standards to cover the whole region as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very, very interesting. So I'd like to now ask Ms. Paula Pino, Director from the Directorate General of Energy at the European Commission, to stand and use our imaginations to think of cold weather.
Thank you, Edith, and good morning. Indeed, I think nobody will be listening to me who wants to hear about heating with these temperatures. And yet in Europe, heating is still the issue, right? And with climate change, heating needs are slightly going down and cooling needs are quickly going up. But indeed, still today, 40% of the EU energy consumption is spent in buildings, and out of which 80% goes into space and water heating in buildings. So it's really, really significant. So it's no surprise that when we put forward in the European Union the Green Deal vision, meaning a climate neutral continent by 2050 with clear targets by 2030, and saying, well, by 2030, we need to reduce by 55% the greenhouse gas emissions. It is clear that tackling buildings is absolutely essential. There's no way around. That. And so in order to reach those targets, and of course they're accompanied by energy efficiency targets, by renewables targets, we need to tackle, on the one hand, the demand. And so clearly make sure that we not only reduce the energy consumption, but make sure that consumption is efficient and that we have all the means that we need for that. And at the same time, we need to work on the supply side, meaning accelerate the renewable energy generation, accelerate energy efficiency. And that's where we come into buildings. If we look at the supply side, of course, heating in Europe is still very, very much marked by fossil fuel technologies, by gas boilers, even by oil. And so the idea is to really, over time, bring that down fundamentally. Now, as you know, with the war started in Ukraine last year, we had to not just stick to our targets, but make sure that we really accelerate that at a much, much faster pace. And this meant that we also need to tackle the heating of the buildings in a much more forceful way. What did it mean in very concrete terms? Well, we've put forward a target of doubling the current deployment rates of heat pumps between now and 2030, meaning today we have about 10 million hydronic heat pumps, and the idea would be to have an additional 30 million by 2030. It's massive, of course. It represents really also a challenge, even in terms of industrial policy, where really the industry needs to put and come together in terms of the manufacturing capacity, but also everything which comes with it. And I really enjoyed listening to Abdulaziz, because you really covered all the fronts when we're talking, and these are common to heating and cooling, because it's not just the targets and the policy measures, it covers a number of fronts. So what again are we doing in terms of the heating and making sure that we have efficient heating appliances? And speaking of the example of the heat pumps, we are tackling the legislation, so the regulatory framework, and there we started, I would say, timidly, with legislation putting forward bans on subsidizing fossil fuel boilers, for instance. Now, with the acceleration that we need to see, we're putting forward much bolder measures, really even looking at banning the fossil fuel boilers all together. And very interestingly, some member states have even already gone further and have on their own initiative, and I'm speaking of Germany, Netherlands, Austria, have put into place bans of new fossil fuel boilers, which is pretty striking when you see how much that is still a reality in the EU. So one is, of course, the regulatory framework, the subsidization, and also the bans of the use of new fossil fuel boilers. But again, as you said, Abdulaziz, I'm very happy to see that we are here working on the same streams. Labeling extremely important, because if we want consumers to make choices which lead us to efficient products, they need to have the information to know what is the product that will allow me to have the best and most efficient energy consumption. So there we're really working on the labeling, which allows us to and allow all consumers to compare what are the most efficient products on the market. And we're currently, as we speak, revising the legislation on labeling, which it means that in practice, we will end up practically with only efficient heat pumps falling into the criteria of efficient appliances. Then we also have what we call the eco-design requirements. So still in terms of legislation, and again, you mentioned it, Abdulaziz, in terms of minimum energy performance requirements, making sure that the products which are put on the market meet with minimum energy performance requirements. That's encompasses a number of products. It's a big work program within the EU, which covers, of course, heat pumps and boilers, but also even computers, the fans. So also on the cooling front. And speaking, because I didn't mention this, but speaking also of the national realities and the fact that, for instance, Germany has now a ban on new fossil fuel boilers. They've now also put a target that newly installed heating systems need to be run on 65% of renewables by 2024, which is 24 is today evening. So as you can imagine, this is proving also very, very difficult. Because it's not so straightforward to get consumers to change, because there are a number of challenges, and the financial challenges is one of them. So, of course, in order to put forward this ambitious targets, we need to accompany the legislation also by the necessary financial support. So that's another aspect. And in the EU, indeed, already backed as a result of COVID, we had put forward a big package, unprecedented financial package, which is aimed at allowing the citizens to really go and do a leapfrog jump in terms of going to energy efficient appliances. So a lot is going now in the member states in the EU into energy efficiency, into renovation, with means financially which were not there before. The other is skills, and we can have the best targets and the best legislation if we don't have the people on the ground who will install, for instance, the heat pumps. You can already forget about it. So now we're working very specifically on a heat pump action plan, which is precisely aimed at covering all these fronts, and work with the industry so that industry really comes together in terms of making sure that there is the necessary training and that we have the skilled workforce. And I'm still puzzled when I hear industry sometimes competing with each other. And there's such a momentum now that industry really needs to come together, independent, put aside the different brands, and focus on building the workforce that is needed to actually deploy all these new appliances. And of course, and that's why we're here this week, research and innovation needs to go into this, needs to continue to go, because there is still a path and a journey to make in terms of making it ever more efficient, lighter, you name it. So that's why still, as we gather here today, it's still, and that's why also in SEAD, the Commission is involved directly, because we believe that there's still margins to be seized in terms of the research, in terms of the innovation that can be achieved here. So with this, just to set the scene, and really nice to see that I think we're working on the same streams. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think before we do the panel discussion, we have a really great opportunity here with two really knowledgeable experts who just presented essentially the whole package of things that need to happen to really accelerate and advance efficiency. I wonder if anybody in the audience has a question. I think we have time for one question, maybe to both speakers, if there are any questions in the room. It's very quiet. No questions.
Maybe a provocative question. So a provocative question, obviously, I'm Brian Dean from Sustainable Energy for All. And obviously we need to have a lot of these fundamental policies. We need to have the technology in place and the skills. How do we get to super efficient deployment? And there obviously there's a big gap between getting minimum energy performance standards and getting the mass population adopting those. But how do we then get to really deploying at scale? The air conditioners that won the Global Cooling Prize, 5 times greater climate impacts. How do we get those type of technologies really into the market at scale? So thoughts on that would be great.
Thank you for the question. So in our case, when it comes to cooling, I think our approach is through showing exactly how much that efficient product will consume and how much that will save to the end user, because that's the final go-to stage when the end user investigates that this product will save by this amount compared to all the other products in the market. Then more end users will purchase this product. They will tell their colleagues or friends that they've purchased this, that their bill is less, and then their friends will go on. And then naturally, this manufacturer will deploy more of that product and ensure that he improves the efficiency of that product. So when we introduced the seasonal energy efficiency ratio, it gave us that edge of showing that compressors that work partially, not consistent throughout the year, have the highest rating. And we had to ensure. Now the market, before most technologies were in the same leveling label, but now after introduction of the seasonal energy efficiency ratio, we find that there's a differentiation between technologies. So the most efficient is at the top, the fixed capacities are at the middle, and then the inefficient ones at the bottom. And then they naturally would, the end users would naturally purchase more efficient. And then of course we enabled it with incentive schemes in some part, so that would ensure that these specific products need to be deployed, but they're expensive. So that's how we went upon. We did.
What SEER levels are
most of us are level B, so we still left some range for the next upcoming future improvements in the labeling, so people would actually go to the highest level. But today in Saudi markets, no, only a few products are in the level. But we see in some countries that they have a double plus, a triple plus, not taking that into consideration upon the development for future improvements of technology. And this is something that we've learned from other countries and we have deployed in Saudi.
Thank you. Well, in our case, and I'd say for good and for bad, we were already really on a path to deploying this efficient appliances. But it's incredible to see what awarded. And let me give you some figures. And maybe I should have quoted this figure also, that from the needs of gas, and you know what this means for Europe, the fact that we lost 80% of the gas supplied by our main supplier. And that actually now we're actively phasing that out on our own initiative. 40% of that gas goes precisely into heating and cooling and water heating. So that tells you a lot. So the population understood that if we no longer have the gas, or if we have it at prices which hit unprecedented levels last year, we need to really have efficient appliances. And it's incredible what this meant already last year. And let me quote you some figures. Alone in Poland, and Poland, I'm not quoting by chance Poland, because Poland is a member state where it's still the role of coal in the energy mix was still among the biggest. In Poland, the number of hydronic heat pumps, of sold hydronic heat pumps, went from 700,000 in 2020 to 1.1 million in 2021. You would not have seen this had we not been forced into it. So ironically, this war is really accelerating the energy transition in a way that we could not and would not have seen otherwise at such a pace. Industry is understanding that, and now we really have to come together across the chain. So meaning that, of course, the regulators, but the industry, the consumers understood the need, and so we need to really tackle all these obstacles to make sure that the products are also available. And then it will be the way to the super efficient, but there will be a way. It won't be a jump, I think.
Thank you very much. And thank you for the great question. So I'd just like to give a hand one more time to our speakers. Thank you very much. And now we'll move to the panel discussion. So we have three excellent panelists. You've already met Mr. Abdulaziz Al-Subaihi. We're also joined by Mr. Sasaki Kotaro, who's Deputy Director for International Affairs at the Agency for Natural Resources and Energy at METI, Japan. Thank you for coming. And we have, it wouldn't be a proper event in Rio without a Brazilian participation. And we're very lucky to have Giovanni Machado, who's Director for Energy Economics and Environmental Studies at the Energy Research Office, EPE, in Brazil. So thank you all three for joining us. And thank you very much, Paula, once more. So this is going to be kind of an informal format. We're just staying put because we have this round table here. So I mean, we just talked about the sort of package of policies. I think it was stated, I haven't seen it stated this clearly back to back on ACs and heating, I think, ever. So thank you very much. I think it was really clear, the regulatory requirements, the incentives, the informational kind of educational campaigns, outreach, capacity building, all of these pieces that need to happen, and then some of the innovation that needs to happen. So there's a piece that we didn't discuss, which is the impact of heat pumps and of air conditioners on energy systems and on peak demand. So increasingly, this is a really important topic, both because we see that in some countries that have really high AC penetration, that ACs can reach up to 75% of peak on a really sunny day. In countries like the US, Saudi Arabia, I don't know what the peak figures are, but I imagine they're quite high as well. And heat pumps as well, while we don't see them having an outsized impact on the electricity system per se. Again, we're thinking about the peaks and the impact on electricity sector peaks, which really ties into energy security. And so I'd like to combine the efficiency discussion with the discussion of flexibility and of how we can try to use these efficient appliances more effectively to better integrate them with energy systems, also taking advantage of the flexibility capacity. And I'll just quote one number, I'll limit myself, which is that in the IEA's net zero scenario, flexibility on power systems needs to quadruple in the net zero energy scenario. So we need 4 times as much flexibility. And here we are putting a lot of new load onto the system that's distributed. So that's my brief introduction, and I'll jump right into the questions. And I'll just go one by one, kind of, maybe I'll start with Giovanni and move backwards towards me. But just to start with, are there any examples of management of air conditioners or electric heating, even if they're at a pilot phase, to try to start to get some of this flexibility into the system? And if not, what are the first steps that you're taking? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Rio. I apologize for not using my jacket on, but I just had to walk like 15 minutes to be on time because I forgot about the reversal lane so I could make it by transportation. In any case, the matter of flexibility to deal with the peak load, it's very important. But in the case of Brazil, because we have a huge interconnected power system, and 65% of the power generation is based on hydroelectricity, then to assure Brazil can assure reliability and deal with the peak loads by storing water, which means energy as well in Brazil. In case of Brazil, mainly on those hydropower plants with reservoir. It's hard currently to build new hydropower plants with reservoir. Most of them are runoff rivers. But in any case, we are changing the way those hydropower plants with a reservoir are, dispatched, so we can save water as needed and dispatch the hydro when it needed. When the water is not available, just like in the last drought, very severe drought in 2021, then thermal power plants are dispatched if needed, if we do not have enough wind and solar at that time. It's important to bear in mind that the peak load in Brazil currently is at 4 p.m. because of the need of cooling. So putting on the top of the load. So wind and solar are becoming more and more important. When we look to energy storage, as I mentioned, as of today, it's much more about water than batteries. But there is a lot of studies regarding batteries, mainly to deal with, let's say, with transmission bottlenecks and things like that. Demand response is being structured with policy and market design, but there is potential, but it's need to be untapped. And of course, the potential requires sharp variation in load. When the load is flat, there is no potential. So recently, at the beginning of this year, we had a workshop on a project financed by GIZ in Brazil to review the potential of response, demand response in Brazil, and it was a very interesting project that show us that the main potential are as of today in steel and cement industries. And to conclude my first intervention, it's important to bear in mind that one of the main challenges in Brazil is social losses, meaning bypassing the meter, taking the electricity directly from the grid. And so it's very related to air conditioning. So this is, if you look to Brazil, the reality, the economic reality of Brazil, this is one of the major challenges in Brazil, how to deal with the social losses. So that's my intervention by now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Giovanni. And yeah, the issue of access to cooling is a very, very important one that you flagged. So I appreciate you flagging that. So Mr. Sasaki, if I can turn to you, and Giovanni mentioned demand response, and I know that in Brazil you've just introduced a kind of permanent demand response program after having some pilots. In Japan, what are the steps being taken, if any, to to get the flexibility out of some of these devices? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, moderator. My name is Kotaro Sasaki. So the question, my answer is, I believe that the demand side initiatives for peak load reduction, the use of low-cost or surplus renewables are very important. And in Japan, demand response is already being used in production processes and manufacturing industry and in storage batteries installed in buildings. I would like to introduce an example of a demand response using storage batteries and air conditioners in a supermarket. In the supermarket, load leveling was achieved by changing storage batteries at night. The night is electricity demand is low, and discharging them during the daytime. So when electricity demand is high, at the same time, demand was reduced by controlling the air conditioning load in real time during peak electricity demand periods. In addition, the system was also fully automated, so including the reporting of demand response result. Since the demand response was handled through automation, it could be implemented without increasing the workload. Operators were able to receive merit from implementing energy saving and as well as benefits from demand reduction. Thank you.
Thank you. That's really interesting. And just a very brief follow-up question. When you say the operators, are these the utilities who are managing the demand?
Yes, so the utilities and it is not realized, but we are hoping in the future there are aggregators to control the demand. Thank you.
Thank you. So same question for Mr. Abdulaziz about demand side flexibility. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your question. So yes, peak load is of concern, and we do take that into consideration upon the development of these standards. We list or enforce our maps not only on T1, which is 35 degrees Celsius or 95 degrees Fahrenheit, but also T3, 46 degrees Celsius and 115 degrees Fahrenheit. And so that contributes to minimize the consumption at the peak load. And we naturally improve these requirements every 3 to 5 years, increasing that level of maps in both T1 and T3. While also these retrofits projects that I mentioned in the morning, yes, we're increasing the amount of new ACs being purchased and deployed in housing, but we're also working intensively on replacing the existing stock as well with new efficient ACs as well to reduce that demand.
Thank you very much. So now just maybe a more technical question, which is, in order to, so Sasaki-san mentioned automating this flexibility potential, which requires there to be some technology in the air conditioners to enable that. So often the term that people use that's not technical is smart ready. And there are discussions about introducing this kind of requirement into minimum energy performance standards. So requiring not only energy efficiency, but requiring that these devices be smart ready, so that when the structure is in place to do the kind of thing that this example of grocery stores showed us, that they can do it. So just a question on whether there are discussions about introducing these kinds of requirements into minimum energy performance standards, or maybe this has already been introduced and I don't know about it. So please, if you could, maybe we'll start with you, and thank you.
So the function of, as we call it, Smart Ready has not been implemented as part of our standards, only maps, as I mentioned, but we have planned to update the large capacity AC standard as of this year and in the next upcoming months. And if we investigate through our technical committee that consists of either government, labs, international standard organizations, manufacturers, if we propose this as in terms of a function and we find consensus among all, then we have to provide this to leadership. And then there is a possibility that we get this approvals and then inflect it as an enforcement procedure. Thank you.
Thank you. So just moving directly back down the line, Mr. Sasaki.
Thank you very much. So I mentioned that the demand side initiatives for peak load reduction is very important. And last year, Japan amended the act, the law on the rationalization of the energy use to add measurement related electricity demand optimization as one of the pillars of the act. And we started to discuss requiring air conditioners and electric water heaters to be equipped with remote control functions under the framework of the Top Runner program. And at the same time, it is also expected to encourage consumer to change their behaviors. So from the supply side, we would like to encourage consumers' behavior to change by so for example, ranking, evaluating, and publicizing the degree to which retailers provide information and services for consumers. And in the future, we would like to encourage further energy conservation through such demand response efforts. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Giovanni, would you have any comments?
Yeah, it's still under discussion. It's not implemented in Brazil. As I mentioned before, the market design for demand response is not ready yet, and so this kind of discussion regarding the flexibility of the air conditioning equipments are not is still under discussion. There is nothing concrete about that yet.
Thank you. And many countries, most countries, I would say, even are in this, I think, in this boat where this is part of why I asked the question, to understand where the thinking is, because there are very few places where there's any sort of requirement for smart readiness or remote control requirements for heating or cooling or other electric appliances. So now a bit of a tricky question to end with. I think this will be our last question. So there's a lot of discussion about who would deliver this kind of flexibility. And I mean, traditional energy efficiency programs have all sorts of ways to reach customers, to inform customers, but they rely on more traditional channels of, retail and labeling, et cetera. To get into the customer's home and ask them to use their appliance flexibly is much trickier. And there's a lot of talk about pricing to incentivize behavior. And there's also talk about aggregators or utilities providing these kinds of services, and the sort of changes that need to happen to how energy systems are structured in energy markets, so that there's remuneration, so you can get paid for aggregating this demand response. So I'll just start with a very brief anecdote. My grandmother 10 years ago told me that she lives in New Jersey. I'm from the US. And she said, my utility, they pay me, I don't know, a few bucks a month, and I don't feel a difference, but they say they cycle my air conditioner. And she thought it was a good deal. So for her, it was simple. It made sense. And she signed up for it because she didn't see it as a problem. And she counts her money. So that's just one example of the customer perspective, right? So I'd like you to take this question either from I'm not sure where your discussions are, but I think the customer perspective is quite interesting, but also whether there are steps being taken to enable there to be a revenue stream to build a business model around this kind of service, this kind of flexibility service. And if we can start with you, Abdulaziz, thank you.
Thank you for the question. So in case of Saudi Arabia, actually, we have the regulated Saudi electricity company, which has a program on a voluntarily basis to work with the biggest contributors to peak load, whether it's from the government or commercial, nudging them to manage their loads at peak load. But when it comes to end users and who would be the responsible body for aggregating that end use demand side I'm not sure actually who is it going to be, but it's probably either the regulator or the Saudi electricity company.
Okay, thank you very much. So it's very interesting story of that. So first of all, utilizing the storage batteries and the heat pump water heaters are important to meet consumers' comfort. This is the best for the answer. And after then, demand response can contribute to the stabilizing electricity supply and demand by suppressing demand when they are tight. Also, it can charge surplus electricity from renewable energy sources. On the other hand, it would be difficult to implement such demand response by on only user behavior. Therefore, in the future, it is important to aim for demand response ready. It means that various resources installed in residences are equipped with remote control functions as standard, and aggregators that can automatically control or remote control functions as these functions are created much more, and demand response is effectively used in the electricity market. So Japan is tackling to make the demand response ready in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Once again, the market design is not completely yet, so it's still under discussion, but our feeling is that the LDCs and aggregators will have the role to do that, to have the demand control. But once again, the national operator still the agent that is in charge of providing the most of the flexibility in the Brazilian case, because of all the interconnections of the system. So my feeling is that the flexibility from the national operator will be greater than those from demand response. But the demand response will be very important. But for the reliability of the system as a whole, the national operator still the main stakeholder.
Thank you. So this has been a very interesting discussion. Thank you all for your contributions. I think between the presentations, which really laid out rapid and broad uptake of efficient appliances in Saudi Arabia, in Europe, and then this discussion on the flexibility side of things, which is a newer discussion, I would say, but a very interesting one, and I think a very important one, particularly as we see more happening on distribution level with solar PV and distributed storage. It's a discussion to be continued. I'd now like to invite Jonathan Sinton to give us some closing remarks, the head of the Secretariat of the Energy Efficiency Hub.
Thanks very much. So just to pull back the lens a little bit, this is all significant because demand for people, by people for heating and cooling is going to continue to grow, and particularly for cooling as climate change becomes more part of our daily lives. The IEA recently released a report on the health impacts of sustainable cooling. About 3.5 billion people worldwide, about half the world's population, lives in very hot climates, and air conditioner ownership among that population is only 15%. And that 15% already is demonstrating big health impacts. It's saving close to 200,000 lives every year. That need is going to continue to grow, and the health benefits that not just to mortality and to health will increase with increasing deployment of air conditioners, which need to be efficient and powered by sustainable energy. Now, of course, there are health impacts of underheating as well, and those are also well known. So everything that we've heard about today, all of the developments in Saudi Arabia, in Brazil, in Japan, in Europe, depend on learning from past experience and learning from each other. And that's what the Clean Energy Ministerial is about. That's what the Energy Efficiency Hub is about. That's what SEAD is about. It's not just one thing. It's not just increasing flexibility, working on utility regulations to incorporate demand response. It's not just about standards. It's not just about incentives. It's about the packages. And so SEAD is a place where all the participants can learn from each other about that. And those exchanges depend on the generosity up to now and going forward of all the members. That generosity is what we've seen demonstrated here today. And well, I think we're going to see quite a bit more of it in other fields over the coming days. So thank you all for joining, and hope to see you again soon.
Thank you. And yeah, with that, I think we're closing this session and moving into the opening session of the ministerial. Thank you, everybody. And thank you to our speakers.